Today I'm going to go over some of the worst basketball advice that you can get. First one, and you'll hear this one a lot, is how you should do moves, and they should be exactly a certain way. So example, between the legs, you might hear that, okay, you should always step forward with this front leg, the opposite leg of the hand with the basketball, get low, you know, have the hand low, all that kind of stuff. And those are all things even I'll teach. I'll give a lot of advice saying, hey, this is how you should do it to be more effective with it. But I'm always saying that in context of that specific move. And what I'm saying by that is, okay, we're working on our attack between the legs, that specific move, right? I want you to do exactly what I just said there, and that'll make you more effective with it. However, that doesn't mean there's never a time to do an upright between the legs. That doesn't mean there's a time where maybe you would want to pull it back. That doesn't mean that you should never work on maybe having the dribble higher on the next dribble, where normally I would tell you to get low and stay low. Or I've seen some coaches say on a wrap behind the back, you should never take a cross step like this. I highly disagree. There's times where that makes great sense and there's a lot of good counter moves out of it. I think there's two keys here that are really good advice. One, for me, I like to teach players, okay, we're working on this specific footwork with the wrap behind the back. I want to make sure you can do that so you've mastered that option. And when we're working on that specific version, we want to master those details exactly the way we're trying to learn them. But, and here's the big thing, that but is that I'm not saying this is not okay, and I'll tell players, hey, look, there's gonna be a time where we're gonna need to work on this, or this is an option we'll need to have. So the key here is not making things so right and wrong. You should never do it this way, you should always do it this way. There's gonna be times in game situations where you're gonna need that variation that's different from the way that a lot of coaches will say you should always do whatever move, layup, you name it. We'll get to layups later. And not having these variations is gonna limit you in games. Next piece of bad advice is to stay within your role and only play to your strengths. Now there's some detail with that, but first leave a comment. Let us know if there's any bad advice you've ever got that you think held back your game. And also I got a free workout for you pinned to the comments that will help you expand what you can do with your handles to help you with that first piece of bad advice. It'll get you outside the box of what you normally have been taught to do. Definitely check that out. So context is key with always playing within your role and your skills, right? Playing to your strengths. So example, let's say you're not a very good ball handler. You can't dribble very well. Well, in a team game situation where you got a coach on the bench and you're playing 5-on-5, you know, and it's like for your high school, middle school, whatever the case may be, in those instances, yes, I would recommend play more to your strengths and play within your role in those situations. Maybe from time to time break out of that. However, when we're talking about your practice, you should be really working on those weaknesses so you have a more well-rounded game and you're harder to stop. Example, if you're not a good ball handler and you can really shoot, that's going to limit you in games because defenders are just going to play you real tight, and now you're not going to be able to do much because you're not comfortable dribbling to get past them, right? So if you can develop that handle, now you're going to be more of a threat to drive. Now they have to play off you a little more. Now that strength of yours, that shot, is going to be more open again. But you've got to put in the work in two situations. One, on your own, getting in work on the handle, just repping things out, whatever that move may be, you know, and just adding different moves to the bag, working on your footwork off the dribble. All that stuff's important. Again, check out the free workout pinned to the comments. That'll help you. But then two, you got to get into some pickup games. You know, scrimmage, you know, or maybe some kind of a travel team where coaches are more okay with you, you know, doing things outside of what you would typically do for your team games for your school, right? So in those situations, you can start to get experience. Okay, when I do this move, the defender bites, they don't bite, this is the spacing they have, I need to pick up this habit of having my off arm active, whatever the case may be. You're gonna learn a lot and get better at those skills by doing them in games. A lot of those little things you just can't get without having defense on you. Another tip for this would be play more one-on-ones and work on those weaknesses. Because if you're stuck to one single role and thing that you can do, trying to play at the next level is gonna be really difficult. You have to stand out at middle school to play more in high school. You have to stand out even more at high school to play at a good college. And if you want to play pro from there, you have to be more than just a role player. An example of this is Patrick Beverly. Everyone knows him for his defense, but when he was playing in more like younger leagues, he was scoring a lot of points, right? So it's not like he was just always the defensive specialist to get him to that NBA level. This next piece of bad advice drives me nuts, and it's to only use overhand layup. Now, I'm not saying overhand layups are bad, but what I am saying is a lot of context gets missed. So I've heard from a lot of players, and I've seen some coaches tell players, no, you should only ever use an overhand layup because underhand layups are easier to block. We'll talk about that more. That's another piece of bad advice. That's a later one though. But a lot of them just they want their players to start with these overhand layups is the key. And they don't necessarily think the other layups are bad, but they're telling players at a youth level, no, you should only ever take an overhand layup. And they never take a second just to say, hey, but as you get more advanced or as you get comfortable with these overhand layups, you're going to need other types of layups, underhand, sidearm, all kinds of stuff, right? And I just think it's a big disservice to players to not make that a point. And I've just seen some coaches that just say, yeah, no, you should only ever take overhand layups, and well, that's just dead wrong. You watch any NBA game, college for that matter, I'd say at least half, if not more, of the layups are not overhand layups. In the NBA, I think you're gonna see more underhand, sidearm, and then occasional overhand layups. I'd say those are maybe like a third of them at best. Next piece of bad advice is that underhand layups are easier to block, or you should never use them, or whatever the case may be. Underhand layups get such a bad rap, and it's terrible because, again, if you watch NBA, college, any high-level basketball, even like a good high school player, they're probably going to use more underhand than overhand. The reason why they're so important is it allows you to extend the ball away from your body. So if the defender's right here, you can extend it away from them. If they're behind you, it's the better option. Even if they're in front of you, and you reach out like this, a lot of times when they go for the ball, they're gonna go for it here, and then as you extend, boom, they're gonna hit your arm and you're gonna pick up foul calls. But a lot of coaches are always worried, oh, you gotta take that overhand layup because it's so much stronger. Sure, it probably is, it's probably better control, and you might be able to pick up some and ones, but these underhand layups, you can be strong with them if you know how to do them correctly and you have a good grip on the ball, number one, but number two, you're gonna pick up some more of those foul calls, whereas with these more power overhand layups, a lot of times you're not going to get those calls as much. So there's a trade-off between both. I'm not saying one is necessarily better than other in situations where there is contact. I'm just saying that just because you're using underhand layup doesn't mean you're going to get blocked. Doesn't mean that it's a bad choice necessarily. It just depends on the situation, context, your abilities. I'm not gonna go too crazy in depth with this. At the end of the video, I'm gonna link you to another video where you can see some stuff with live defense that shows you why underhand layups are actually a good thing. Next piece of advice, and I actually got into it with some people on this on Facebook, and it's about inside hand layups. We had a little debate going back and forth. It was respectful though. And basically they were saying you should never teach players inside hand layups because it's a low percentage shot and yada, yada, yada. And I can see their point, number one. Number two, I teach players as beginners, no, we wanna make sure on this left-hand side that we can do this left-hand layup. And their argument was basically that you're teaching players bad habits, right? By allowing them to use this inside hand. Again, at the end of the video, I'll link you to a video that'll show you how to master your layups with both hands and some of the biggest mistakes to avoid. So yes, when a player's starting, great advice, teach them to use that correct hand on the correct side, left hand, left side, right hand, right side. But this is very similar to the overhand layup debate. Some coaches will say, no, you should never take anything that's not an overhand layup. Just like a lot of coaches will say, you should never take a layup that's not left hand on the left side. There's where I disagree. I teach players first master left hand, left side, but then there's gonna come a time or a point when you're more advanced and we want that inside hand layup or the wrong hand or goofy hand layup, whatever you wanna call it. And the reason is simple. If I got a defender right here on my hip, this layup, they might be able to come block. This layup, they're not going to be able to block nearly as easily. Now, another argument a lot of coaches will say, well, it's a low percentage layup because that can happen. And yes, it can, but I don't think that alone makes it a low percentage layup. The reason it's a low percentage layup is because maybe you taught your players that you should never take that inside hand layup, so now they never feel like they can practice it. They've never tried it in games. And yeah, something you've never practiced, you're not going to be very good at, and it will be low percentage. If I've never shot a basketball, I'm probably not gonna make many shots. If I've never practiced left-hand layups on the left side, I'm probably gonna have a hard time with them. But anything I practice, I can get better at. So the low percentage argument isn't necessarily a good one. It's just a matter of, are you practicing it? Are your coaches allowing you to practice it? And is it something you've developed? And of course, are you using it in the right game situations? Inside hand layup when I'm right here, well, I don't really have an angle. That would make it a bad layup. If the defense is right here, inside hand layup is terrible. Another situation would be, let's say you're on a fast break, there's no one around you and you have the wide open layup and you're just not very good at these left hand layups. In that game situation, if you know for sure you can make that right hand layup on the left side and it's easier, I'm gonna tell you to take that right hand layup in the game. But when we come back to practice, okay, we need to get some more work on that left hand. You'll notice again with this, just like a lot of the other bad advice, context is what's important. Another piece of bad advice is that your set point on your shot, so that's basically where a lot of players will hold it at a certain position, needs to be at a certain point, and or that you should or shouldn't have a set point. So let's break all that down. There used to be a time where coaches would always say you have to have the ball here and you got to get the ball up here, otherwise it's going to get blocked because, you know, the ball's low and a defender can get the hand on the ball or whatever the case may be. However, that's not taking into consideration every time you pick up the ball, where does the ball come from? Here, right? So there's still a point where the defense could get their hand on the ball, number one. Number two, if you get the ball here, I think the thought process was, oh, now you're going to release it higher, whereas from down here, you could push it more forward, making the angle easier for a defender to block. And now we've seen with players like Steph Curry, they don't really have a set point. They just kind of go right here all the way up and they get a nice quick release. And now you hear some people saying that, oh no, that's the way you have to shoot, which is more of a one motion shot where there's no pause here. So there's a few things to consider here. I don't think we should be telling players you have to do this. I don't think we should be telling players you have to do this. I think number one, a player needs to have a form that's within a certain range of parameters. You know, having, you know, the elbow in is probably a good idea. Getting the ball pretty tight to the body, not too out here. not cocking the ball back too much. Things like that I think is really important. Making sure we're getting pretty good arc. So yeah, it's not as easy to block, but then within that, let players do what's more comfortable for them. So if that means having the ball here, A-okay. If that means going straight through into a one motion shot and getting that shot off quicker, A-okay. And back to that earlier point, a lot of coaches think this is harder to block, but if you watch Curry, he's really hard to block because he gets the shot off so fast. So not having the ball up high and holding it here really doesn't make a difference because one, he's still getting that arc to get it over defender's hands, and two, the shot is quicker. So now defense, before they can even try to block it, it's already out of his hands. But a little more context is necessary. I think you should be working on both that shot and that shot. And again, even more context, that's after you've mastered a certain one. So if you want to do that one motion, master that first, and then start thinking about adding a little bit more of this two motion shot. And the reason that's important is because there's going to be game situations where maybe you need to jump, hold the ball a little longer, and then get the shot off to just get a better shot, to get it over a defender, especially in the mid-range. This more two motion shot is going to come more in handy. But at the end of the day, I think we should be a little bit more flexible with the way players are shooting and not try to be so rigid with trying to get everyone to shoot exactly the same way. But a little flexibility is A-okay because every player's got different body mechanics, different size, different strength, all that kind of stuff. At the end of this video, I'll link you to another video about why perfect shooting form maybe isn't so perfect. So popping up all around me are the videos that I mentioned earlier in the video that I told you I was going to link you to at the end. Again, the free workout pinned to the comments will help you take your handles next level, and I'll see you in the next video.